Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Vermont State College's faculty and staff, the presidents who are here. We have Board of Trustees here and our guests. This is a great time of year. We finally saw winter lumber out and spring finally take the stage. It's a great time of graduations, of seeing the end to the school year, and there are 215 of you here today, which is a record number for the Vermont State College's academic retreat, which is a real testament to you in terms of your commitment to this profession, your commitment to each other, and also really your testament to the students who are part of the Vermont State Colleges. I know that one of the biggest reasons why you come to this event is to think about the topic of the day, but it's also to meet with each other as colleagues across sister institutions. So again, if you will just take a minute to look to your neighbor, shake hands, introduce yourself, say hello, and welcome. So I'd also like to introduce Interim Vermont Technical College President Dan Smith, who will begin the day and introduce our keynote for the day. Thanks.
Thanks, Annie. It's wonderful to look out and see so many familiar faces and greet you from a new position. I'm delighted to be here, and on behalf of the staff and faculty of Vermont Technical College, welcome to our little hilltop on a beautiful day. You know, it's funny, I wasn't sure I'd remember after vast graduation last night, commencement on Saturday, and then our honors convocation, I wasn't sure I'd remember how to approach a podium unless a bagpipe was playing. We actually have a student who's a piper, so we've insourced our bagpipe playing. I want to really quickly, before we get to the introduction of Dr. Phil Gardner, I want to thank the committee that put together the day. The faculty and staff who are presenting in the concurrent sessions, Elaine Sobchak from the Chancellor's Office, Mary Jean Taylor from here at Vermont Tech, for their tireless efforts pulling together the details of the event. If you're presenting at a concurrent session, would you please stand, and would MJ Taylor, if she's not running around, come out, and Elaine Sobchak, where are you? Let's just give them a quick round of applause. Okay, it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Phil Gardner. Dr. Gardner is an international expert in higher education and workforce readiness and is frequently on the road sharing his research and best practices in the field. He is director of the Collegiate Employment Research Institute at Michigan State University, where he's been for 28 years. Under his leadership, the Institute stands out as the center to share information and expertise with those seeking insights on young adults at work. The center is innovative, current, and research-driven. I know among our faculty, research and data drive all, and so we're looking forward to his presentation. It strives to connect students not only to work for pay, but to help young adults find work that is useful and meaningful. The center is also committed to helping higher education institutions better succeed in graduating students who can hit the workforce running. I'm pleased to welcome Dr. Philip Gardner to lead us in a conversation about the relationship between higher education, successful employment, and in particular, this intuitive yet transformative idea of the T-shaped professional. Thank you very much.
Okay, good morning, everyone. I appreciate being here and having the opportunity to come to Vermont. I have to admit that the first thing I have to do is apologize for the fact that when you mentioned Morrill Hall, after a decade of anguish, last year we had to take down Morrill Hall. It was the oldest building on campus, but we couldn't save it anymore, and so we now have Morrill Plaza. But as the first, it is very, very tastefully done. It is in the heart of Old Campus, and remember, we're the oldest land-grant college and the first land-grant college. So Morrill Hall was really important, and we couldn't save it. Second thing is, I'm going to have a difficult time today unless one of those mics works. I usually roam when I talk. I don't stand in one place. So if I get fidgety up here, you'll know why. So we're going to talk about the transition from college to work, and we're going to talk about what's going on in the workplace. I'm going to approach it from that way and how it's impacting higher education. The first thing is, there is no organization that's business model is not under attack today. And ours is under attack from many, many different perspectives. I'm looking at it from the role of the employer back, but we know that it's under attack from financial, oh good, this is wonderful. We know it's under attack from financial reasons for parents that graduate on time and the huge student debt. We've got politicians that think that higher education is supposed to do certain things. And so everybody's got their hand in about making us more accountable what we do and how we do it. And we're under attack for how we deliver and how we interact and what we make meaning of every day. And every organization that I go to, if you bring out your smart machine that, actually I don't see many on the desk, that's kind of interesting. Usually the smartphones are out, but these aren't phones anymore, and they're machines that are just disrupting, and I'm going to talk about that. But the way to disrupt higher education is the way we deliver, the MOOCs, the ability to now think of all kind of creative ways to allow people to assemble learning in a way that they can stack or they can get merit badges and somehow equate to some total knowledge is very disruptive, and we don't know how to handle it. And I'm going to explain what's going on from my world and back to your world, and you'll see this every day. And then I'm going to tell you how bad it's going to get and not how better it's going to get. Okay, so the first thing is I want to go back to many of you in this room. The age demographics in this room favor me for a change. I'm older, but many of you who graduated from university or college anytime from the late 50s until the late 80s, this is what kind of transition from college to work was like. This is my home out in the West. I grew up out West, and I would go hiking in our mountains, and just like you, and you'd come to break in a trail, and you'd had to make some effort to get across, but it was not physically impossible. And that was the way that college work was. It wasn't impossible. You didn't have to have any experience. Yes, there were internships and co-op and those kind of activities, but less than 25% of students engaged in those. You didn't have to do that. You created other combinations of things on campus, and what employers were really looking for were people that had good knowledge of what you as faculty taught every day. Why? Because when you get on the other side, you notice it's pretty relatively flat. Well, you were in your first jobs 5 or 6 years. And during that period of time, employers trained, they did a lot of training. They taught young people what the workplace was like, how to apply your knowledge to the workplace. And we did it in a variety of formats. And one of the most common ways was what we called job rotation programs or management rotation programs, or management, where we put people in, and every 6 months to a year they transfer to a different part until the end of the 4th or 5th year. Then they'd find their place in the organization, and during that time they'd figure out how an organization worked, and they'd figure out all this knowledge. So most of the training, distinguished from knowledge acquisition, which are two different things, were done separately and by separate entities. Now, during this period of time, approximately 65% of all college graduates were hired by Fortune 500 companies. And then you take out K-12 and government, you pretty well covered the base. Now, there's differences based on regional economics, but certainly in my part of the world, that's true. So when I started the Institute as a result of the recession in 1982, state legislature started it, Michigan State would send 200 students a year just to GM. 155 students from chemistry and chemical engineering alone to Dow Chemical. I'll come back to that in a minute. So out of that, we built institutional arrangements to accommodate that. So we built career services, from my point of the world, around providing Fortune 500 companies space to interview on campus, career fairs, and things like that. And, and those companies adapted their hiring to our academic calendar. Okay, and that was kind of cool. And then we did one very important thing. We created what we call the first destination survey, or the placement rate, which now every politician in the country, including the president, think it's the holy grail, and it's absolutely meaningless. Okay, but at that time it was really, really important, because if you were in your first job 4 to 5 years, you were attached to the labor market, and you had a place, so that number was significant, and it was important. Now, here's what graduation is like today, and Vermont's a good example of this, because with the kind of sports that you take place here, they are extreme sports. It is an extreme sport to graduate today. You can't get across, and this picture is unlike the first one, which is static. This one is in constant motion. So the right side, the employer side, the world out there is moving away from the academy at an accelerated rate. And unfortunately, we're in a very different kind of labor market than we've been in for a long time. And so even if you land on the other side and a young person is able to make it, you don't know if the footing's going to be able to sustain them when they get there. But here's the really significant thing that I can't do in any picture is the other side is actually higher. So somebody has to jump out, get across it, and actually land higher. So what's happened here is you can't get across without experience of some kind. I'm going to come back at the end and talk about internships, but we've got a mindset among many people that's the internship. And yes, it plays an important role, but it's not the only way, but it's the internship. And you've got to have experience. One reason is employers don't train anymore. That went out when we changed the economy and began to reshape the economy in the 1990s and went to a network-based economy, opened up employment from internal to just buying talent on demand. So we get it from any source. So you didn't build your internal talent, therefore you didn't train anymore. And so the ROIs on training are very, very low, and so companies don't want to invest because there's so much movement. Most college graduates now stay in their first job less than 24 months, even in this economy. And before this economy in 2007, it was probably 14 months. There's movement going on all over the place. And a lot of that, 35% of that, was probably moving from one company to another company within a year. But a lot of companies are just moving people very quickly once they get there. So companies aren't training. So where's that training going? It's coming back. It's pushed back to us. I'll come back to that in a minute. No training, yes, and then the type of employer has changed. Now, basically for the last decade, only 35% of college hiring has been done by Fortune 500 companies. It's going to go up here because they have some real huge problems in workforce succession. So we're seeing Fortune 500s coming back very aggressively. But we spend as much effort on General Motors today as we did back in 1980 when they hired 300, and we celebrate when they hire 17. And our administration still wants us, though I have a very good president, but many administrations want those Fortune 500 companies. When I look at the top 10 employers from Michigan State, only 5 of them are top Fortune 500 companies. Our top employers, and this crosses a very large business school and a very large engineering school, are Teach for America, AmeriCorps, and the Peace Corps, and a whole bunch of nonprofits, because students are looking at things differently. 35 to 40% of all students are hired by companies under 500, which we never heard of, and which do not follow the academic calendar. And so when they have to hire, they have to hire. So how do you transition students out that are sitting there at a senior year in February, and they have a job offer, from a really good job offer from a second stage growth company, which is somebody with 10 to 100 employees coming out of an entrepreneurial stage, and they need them in February, and they have to finish school. What are you going to do? They aren't going to wait until May. Now, so we've got some pretty in-depth students that will quickly switch to all their senior classes, make sure that all their senior classes are backed up by online courses so they can switch and move out into the job and then transfer their courses to online courses. But how are you and I, as faculty that are rigid in our interpretation of when we have to be in class and how we deliver that, and how are we going to provide when talent is now on demand and only 35% of the jobs we're providing students are key to the academic year? It's a challenge. But now we're also stuck with doing the same things, like career fairs and things, to people that don't use them. But we still have to provide career fairs because I don't have any revenue if I didn't. I'm also the Executive Director of Career Services for Michigan State. Thanks to my president for that. She asked me to do that last October. I am not an administrator. She does have great glee in announcing when I have to, in public, that here's my reluctant administrator. But she has some things she wants me to do, and I'm grateful for that. But, you know, I'm still dealing with systems built in the 50s and 60s for an economy that doesn't work. But you can't let go because all my revenues are generated out of those career fairs. And yet we're really trying to do different. So you got a different world. Now, here's the bad part. The thing that's coming in the world I work in is changing so fast. We went from a linear economy that was very favorable to new college graduates, even in economic downturns, which I'll show you in a minute, but to a networked economy that completely realigned labor, organizes it different. It is now has no boundaries or affiliations that it has to be loyal to, so it can be global. And they link these people together, and it great efficiencies in human resources, which means that we don't need as many people to work. And here's where it gets really challenging because we tie them to technologies, and technologies are changing quickly. We've been hollowing out jobs at a very rapid rate, more from technology than outsourcing. And many of you who are in the technical areas will probably know this and deal with this all the time. But we do it, and people aren't aware of it, and they get blindsided. So the big example here is law. Not probably one of your high demand majors, but it's law. And what we've seen in the last 5 years or 6 years has nothing to do with the general state of the economy, though it has had some impact. They came in with new, very high sophisticated discovery software that's essentially eliminated 40% of all law jobs, where brand new lawyers start. Now, have we adjusted our supply side to reduce the number of graduates coming out of law school? No, we haven't reduced the number of seats. We have seen the number of applications plummet, so now everybody that applies can probably get in because the seats haven't changed very much. What law school wants to change the number of seats? I mean, they've got a business to run and a faculty to support, and to say we're going to cut 40% of our seats makes a big difference. But it's not the only one. Smart technologies are coming, and they're coming very quickly. In smart machines, we see this. Everybody knows Watson, IBM, and I work with IBM a lot. And IBM is a big advocate of smart machines. Now, they've turned Watson loose on the #1 problem in the United States is healthcare. And so Watson is dealing with healthcare, and it's being used by Sloan Kettering as the model. And just for your note, Watson can read 6,000 pages of medical text a second. And it can then it can sort based, it will do medical text. It will take all the input on a patient. It will make a diagnosis. And it will make a diagnosis, and it will tell you and it'll sort all the prescriptions out of what should the treatments be based on what the literature says. And it does it in minutes. And Sloan Kettering has found that Watson is 95% accurate. You know what the doctor rate is? 45 to 50%. And so this is going to change how we organize healthcare, how we do. This is big data, and IBM's big on it. So IBM, when it comes out with its new book just recently on smart machines, is very positive about the role of smart machines. It takes what most of us economists say as an equilibrium approach is, yes, we'll have disruption over here, but we're going to create all these jobs over here. And so what happens is they neglect the fact that the people that are over here don't necessarily have any way to get over here, and the fact that these jobs may not come as fast as we lose jobs over here. Now, there's other points of view about this. One group led by Brian, I want to say Bjornsson, but it's too long of a Swedish name. He's at MIT. He's written a book, A Race Against the Machine, and just came out with a new one. And he's much more pessimistic about the impact of machines on you and me in terms of employability. There's a group that just came out from the UK, from a UK researcher, and one from Canada, that are arguing that 40% of the jobs we currently are in today will not be here within 7 to 10 years because they'll be handled by machines. The most dramatic one is the Gardner, G-A-R-T-N-E-R report that just came out. They did an extreme report. They call it a maverick report, and they pushed the boundaries as far as you can go to make a point. And they're calling 90% unemployment if we don't handle this right by machines. And these machines are not sci-fi machines. These are not machines and tools and software. They are already here. And they're coming out of labs. And IBM has developed a neurochip, a cognitive neurochip, because it's the next evolution of chips, because we've reached Moore's law, actually, in the existing chips. They can't go any further with them. And now they've got it down to a disk that's about this big. And it can run forever and never turns red. So it never heats up. And it has as much functional power as the human brain. And now they're downsizing, it will soon be in your smartphones. So talk about a machine that has the computer capacity of the human brain. You start linking those together. And this is what this report is saying. These are not things that are sci-fi 20, 30 years, 40 years from now. They will be out in the next 5 years. And what's interesting is the places that think that they're safe in higher education, the ones that I get the most resistant to in the business school, that we just keep putting out graduates because business degrees pay, are the ones that are going to be hardest hit. Accounting, financial analysts, and things like that are going to be the hardest hit by these new technologies. Engineering is going to have some disruptions. The other one that I'm not sure higher ed is ready for is, but they're talking heavily about the need for fewer in research faculty, because the cognitive machines can do most of the work, leaving just fewer people to run the machines. It's coming. So why does I mention that and say, okay, now he's got me. It's a real downer day. It's 9:30 in the morning, and I'm not going to make it until 4 o'clock this afternoon because, well, the point is, it's exciting because now we get to turn education upside down, because if we just educate to get somebody out the door and a job, their job's not going to be there. We got to educate them for more than that. We got to prepare them and enrich them for more than that. So it gets down to, how do we take what we're really, really good at, and that's teaching people to do content knowledge, depending on where you are, technology, engineering, sociology, economics, and make it meaningful for a lifetime so that they have the ability to adapt to all these changes and they don't get left behind. So it gets down to skills, but let me get there on just some real quick things. This tells how bad it is. This recession has been terrible. The last three, the ones that are if you go from the right, these are the recoveries in jobs from recessions. The last three have been significant because they've all impacted young people. The recessions before 1990, had little to do with college students. Today, this particular recession has decimated young people. It has been very difficult for them. They're still not attached very well to the labor market. Huge consequences for us in 10 to 20 years. But you can see we're still coming out of this. We're still not getting the job growth. And it's not just because the economy hasn't gone right. We won't admit to ourselves that maybe we don't need as many jobs. So what are we going to do for people that want to work and need to work? What's society going to look like? But it's going to take a while. We don't think we'll get back to the employment we had at the beginning of 2008, before the crash, until 2016. Now, college labor market's doing a little bit better. on the whole. Not great, but it's doing a lot better. It's filling the gap faster. Why? Because as the economy does better, we're having a lot more turnover. Turnover, most organizations hate it, but I love it, because when turnover starts increasing, then I have more opportunities for young people, because those are the ones that come to fill the seats. And so we're seeing more and more turnover as the economy gets better. Employers are leaving. We call it poised to leave indexes are very, very high, because most employees want to move. They've been trapped in a position. They haven't had salary increases, more or less. So the only way to leverage what their knowledge base is to move to another company. And they're starting to do that. So I Quit is a really, really good message to undergrads and to your college grads, because that means that there's going to be opportunities for them. Now, anybody born since the late 1980s was given a demographic card at birth that was a gift. They didn't ask for it. Their parents maybe didn't plan it that way. But it was this card that says, geez, when you graduate from college or even high school, you get a job free. Because all these boomers, yes, all you boomers in this room, are going to retire. Yeah. Not happening. At least not the ones that we need to move out of the way, because the college-educated workforce is pretty much staying in place. Now remember, boomers, only 25% of boomers got college degrees, but those college boomers that did get degrees got really high degrees in a lot of professions, a lot of advanced degrees, because the front end of the boomers is the best educated domestic group we've ever had. Because we were pushed to do that. We were all pushed to do that. Now, last October, Wells Fargo bank came out with some looks at the current workforce and asked those that were making between $30,000, which is the bottom end of the middle income, to $100,000 individual income, which is the top of the middle income, how long they expected to work. 37% said we were going to have to work until our 80s. Now, that doesn't mean much for Clint Eastwood, because Clint can reinvent his career all the time. In fact, he's coming out with a brand new movie. He just got divorced, so that probably means he'll marry somebody in her 30s in no short time at all, and he can reinvent. But look at these age-enhanced of my career development staff at college. You know, having my staff work well into their 80s is a reality now. Who would ever thought that? And when I finished my gig with the president, I'm going to be closer to 80 than I am to legal retirement, so I'm not a good example to use. But people working. Now, when I go out and do organizations, I'm the oldest person in the room, because no college recruiter is over the age of 40. But you're going to see college staff working. Now, this has an advantage, because the grandparent effect works really, really well with young people. Oh, come on, you guys. There's 9:30. Now it's 9:35, and we're still not awake. Okay. But 37% said I'm going to work into my 80s, and we have now 27% of 70. The participation rate of 70 people over the age of 67 has skyrocketed, and most of them are highly educated people. Okay, this survey wasn't over. 34% of people said, I will have to work until I die or I'm physically incapacitated. So 71% of our current workforce says, we're going to have to work until my 80s or until I'm dead. Now, I don't know, that's not the American dream I signed up for, but that's what's happening. And so what happened is we've got pipelines that are plugged, just like my arteries probably, but they're plugged up because people aren't moving through the way most of our labor models say they're going to move through, and it's impacting young people. These positions aren't opening. So we're now creating a lot of entrepreneurial type of programs and things to generate the jobs, to get them into it, because they're doing that. Now, there's one last thing that's affecting this labor market and affecting you on the East Coast more than in the Midwest, but the college labor market this year was really impacted by financial institutions. Now, you have to realize that when we look at college hiring, financial services is probably the fourth most important sector for new college hiring. And they, in 1990 and 10 and 11, they came out pretty strong in hiring, but they have since obliterated their workforce. beginning a year ago. You can't find a banking job. And the reason is that most of the banks, except JP Morgan and Goldman Sachs, decided to do away with their derivatives, which led us into the mess. And so and it started with the Swiss banks, and it's moved its way through everybody else. And then the other thing happened in the United States, they closed down their mortgage operations because mortgage lending is not a moneymaker anymore. So they've closed them down. So the derivative market has just crashed the MBA market, but more from my point of view, the other part, the mortgage lending part and all the lending that contraction affected BAs and associate grades. You do not know how many jobs are handled by banks by two-year college graduates. A significant number. And they were impacted. Most of your banking staff is really two-year graduates that have professional degrees. And it ran havoc in the labor markets. Okay, so it's all about skills. So we're going to make a big shift here and talk about skills real quick. Okay, well, it's not going to be real quick. But anyway, so skill revolution started back, and some of you will remember this because it started in K-12 in 1992, and we had this skill revolution when we changed the economy, and we started talking about it. And I met regularly at the University of Wisconsin and this group of how we're going to change higher education, and nothing happened in higher education. It did happen in K-12 education, but until ABET came along. So ABET is the Accreditation Board for Engineering and Technology, and they came out, and anybody in here that's probably in engineering or applied computer science probably is aware of these. But this is their AK through standards, and this is the first time that you began to introduce depth and breadth. And they pretty well stuck to this until the Accreditation Board got taken over by faculty 2 years ago, and they're going more to depth and doing less with breadth. But that's not going to last very long. Then at Michigan State, at the same time, we were doing a lot of work on these skills and competencies. And by 2000, we had come together. I had 16, but we condensed it with our help of our employers to 12. And we talk about the 12 essentials. Okay? And these are the basic core skills and competency sets that our Board of Trustees has adopted. Every Michigan State student should be familiar with, have opportunities to begin to develop by the time they graduate. They are all now incorporated in our institutional learning goals. And I'll come back more to that in a minute. But that was 2000. Now, a lot of people you hear in the commentaries, the press, all these changing skills. I will tell you a little different is, yes, and I'm going to show you some here in a minute, but the skills that we're talking about don't change. What happens is we introduce technologies, we rearrange work, and all of a sudden the skill package gets stretched this way, or we emphasize certain skills over other skills. But the skills and competencies package basically stays the same. So if we can find a common ground and build the common foundation for every student, later when they enter the workplace and things begin to change, they have the skills that they can pull out and stretch and emphasize when they're needed. Now, I'm going to talk about two more. I'm going to talk about star performers. I'm going to show you some information on that in a minute. But that was the other thing that was going on at the same time in the 90s. Robert Kelly at Bell Labs in Ohio was looking at what makes star performers in organizations. He was looking at 30, maybe 35 to early 40s, what made these young people stand out in organizations. And we're going to talk about that in a minute. And then the last thing I'm going to talk about is what we've seen happen this decade is not the skills change, but the intensity and the higher expectations and the level of importance. And I am going to talk about this. So let me talk about Kelly's work. This is he came up with 9, these strategies were key to star performers. Okay, so nothing unusual here, but just let me point these out, that you got organizational savvy, how an organization works, okay? And then show and tell, which is, basically if we could reinvent kindergarten and college, we'd be much better off. But show and tell. And then you have the gray circle, self-management, understanding time, priorities, time management, priorities, understanding self well enough to develop your own career path, understanding quality work, where you intuitively can judge your work and make it improvements continually without being told. Teamwork, leadership, and followership at the same time. You'll lead a team maybe for a while, but you'll also be working independently. You may be following somebody else. Perspective, and gee whiz, social capital. It's been around for a long time, folks. My students don't believe that until I bring out my little red Rolodex and show them that in 1992, I was using a Rolodex. There was no emails. There was barely, you couldn't get in touch with anybody if you had it. Okay, so having Facebook and LinkedIn and all this stuff as social media capital, you know, that's just icing on something that's been important from the get-go. But in the middle are three of the most important things. One, you must have technical competency. Now, that does not mean that I have to have a technical degree. It means you have to have mastery of your major. Whatever discipline a student chooses to pursue, they need to gain mastery. You're going to see this again. They must have cognitive abilities. These are higher order critical thinking skills that come from transcending the major and being able to talk across disciplines, across functional boundaries, across organizations, because that's where critical thinking comes from. Problem solving comes from the discipline. Critical thinking becomes engaging others from other perspectives, so you have to think about things differently. And then the most important skill of all, or competency, is the ability to know when and how to take the initiative. You tell me in education from kindergarten to graduating from graduate school when students get to take the initiative. Not very often. Okay, that's what a star performer was. Okay. These are the skill sets that we just finished about 4 years ago on how fast, not how important they were. We keep recycling the same questions, but my question was, what's changing the fastest out there? In 1992, it was led by engineering. Today, it's led by every other discipline, trying to catch up in the area of service science, because that's what our whole economy is based on. And the Holy Grail is still taking the initiative. But these are now the ones that are growing the fastest and are very important for every undergraduate to have. Building professional relations, social capital, being able to be analytically literate, knowing statistics. There's not a major that can avoid that these days. Higher order communication skills, continual learning. If nothing else, our duty should be that every student should embrace the way they learn best for them so they can continually do it. Because, as an economist, I tell my students, this 4 years is just the down payment on a house. You've got to buy, that house depends on what you do the next 25 to 30 years. And you're going to be learning 24/7. So if you don't know how you learn the best, you haven't found the ways to integrate learning, and you're just waiting for somebody to tell you, to give you a syllabus and tell you what's on the test, you're not gonna win. Okay, plan and manage a project is a skill that was used to be for older folks, but now is expected from the get-go. And planning and managing a project means that usually in the context today, it's can you do it cross multi-team, cross-discipline. Create knowledge, be able to create new ways to think about things, and by golly, American employers finally began to add global awareness. It's taken them forever. Now, if you deal with health, education, nonprofits, there's two more that are critically important for students that want to go in those areas. Being able to build a team and being able to mentor others from the get-go, really critically important. So these are the things that are shooting up there. Okay. Now, out of that study, before I go to the potato study, two things came out. One, we found that the starting job that we traditionally hold for college students no longer exists, and it is now the internship and expected in at the college level. And the other thing is that we just found that, geez, what we found employers want from a 22-year-old is what Robert Kelly found for star employers that were 35 to 45. Problem here is, and I will tell you now, and because it will come up late in just a minute, is that the skill sets and these competencies every one of us has to have. These are not vocational, when I deal with a lot of faculty, I don't want to teach vocationalism. I'm not here to teach about career. No, we're talking about professional competencies that each of us need. The problem is many of these skills and competencies, when they work together, need higher level cognitive abilities that most 22 years haven't even developed yet. Cognitive doesn't end until the end of your 20s. And there's emotional development here. There's social development that just don't come at 22 and 23. It's almost, I really struggle here with the expectations we're putting on young people today to be able to perform in a workplace at a level that they don't have the experience, nor are they developmentally ready to do yet. But that's the way it is. And so how do we develop and nurture? And I'll show you that when we get to the T. But I have been out in Boise State helping them do employability, and I used a completely different method on skills and analyze. I used a marketing approach where we used contingent evaluation. And so instead of getting away from how important or how successful they have to be, we asked to look at the trade-offs that employers make on the skills that they need to be successful in their first job. So this is right out the gate, not longer. And this forces them to make decisions of relations to skills are what are important. Now, Boise State faculty were really hoping for what? The silver bullet. You give me 2 skills that really stand out, and we'll just focus on this, and everything will be so easy. Wrong. What happened was they do come out in levels of importance, but the confidence intervals overlap. They come in bundles, and they come integrated. So this first bundle is the most important bundle. The dark ones, the heavy boulder ones, are the ones that we directly attribute to coming out of the discipline. The other ones can come from multiple sources that imply that how you present and the context for the discipline becomes critically important. So how are students engaging externally with the discipline and other things that they're doing at the university to be engaged and make sense of this? And then this is set number 2. Now, if I came and did this study in Vermont, I have 24 variables. Some of them are less important. They're just not important. It's interesting. Being able to navigate boundaries was not important in Boise, but every time I go back, people just rotate companies in Boise, you know. One time I come in there, in this company, and they don't even recognize they're doing it. But if I come to other regionals, their dynamics will be different. The skill sets may sort out slightly different, but I guarantee they'll probably stay pretty clustered, pretty much the same. Important here. Integrate, integrate, integrate. Okay. The other thing that's important, and these do discriminate, and they're also embedded in competencies, and we fail to talk about these. We always get hung up on skills, but it's work attitudes and behaviors that are important, and that's why co-curriculars are so important. It's not necessarily the skills, it's the work. It clarifies your values. It gives you how do you act with other people that are different than you. How do you decide what's important? And here's the 3 things that are really important for employers. And these do pull apart. Being accountable, taking responsibility for your actions. Don't have mom and dad show up at the meeting with the employer about your evaluation. Don't have mom and dad complain about the grade that you got in the course. Never happens to anybody in here, right? Okay, you don't have. We've gone from helicopter parents to stealth fighter parents, and pretty soon they'll probably be drones. But anyway, we're coming. Okay, a strong work ethic. You know, this has been the thing that set Michigan State apart forever. And why employers come. We have a very strong work ethic, a blue-collar work ethic among our students. We're facing a problem. We don't have blue-collar labor in our state much anymore. That ethic is disappearing. And how do we instill and keep something that was very valuable to the state embedded in our young people today? It's important. Another one is maturity. You know, you go out and I talk to parents and I talk to students and I say, okay, why, and usually I try to separate, students won't talk if their parents are in the room. So talk to parents. Why do you want your son or daughter to go to college? Get a job. Okay, you go talk to students, and this is the fun part. Why do you want to go to college? And they'll say,
to get a job. And I say, why? Again, because mom and dad told us to get a job. So why in college? And they'll sit there, and they'll sit there, and they'll twidget. And then finally some young woman, it'll be a young woman, will say, I want to learn something. Oh, thank you very much. And I get down, okay, let's be honest here. I'm from off campus. I'm not grading you. There's no faculty. What do you want? We want to have fun. Fun, big F-U-N. And then you talk to faculty. Yes, I talk to you. What do you? They've got to learn something. We're going to nourish their mind, and we're going to give them skills, and mental skills, and mental. It's all about, does job come up there? No. So you go to employers and you ask employers, and you do this in a dark room behind when they're not in public. What do you want? We just want them to grow up. Quit binge drinking, quit all that stuff. Just get them grown up and get them out here, and they're through that phase. There's real inconsistencies here. We're asking for maturity levels that 22 years just are not there yet. And and unfortunately it gets prolonged. And then there's a whole second set that are really important. There's a lot of these are important. Being punctual, adaptable, being passionate. Now we overuse the word passion a lot. It's almost jargon because you can go to the self-help books and they talk about passion. But employers are sincere about this. If you're not passionate about and really highly interested in the work you're doing, why are you doing it? And I'm going to tell you, this is going to be a huge problem in 15 years because every student is going to college because mom and dad says get a degree that gets a job, and they aren't even interested in it. And it's going to be a problem. Okay. So we're going to come to the T-shape. I'm looking at my clock. I'm going to get this done. Annie, I'm going to get this done. So the T-shape is a metaphor. And it looks something like this. And it's not new. It's been around a while. And it's all over the place. But it's not put together. Now, the T concept came out of a group called IDEO Design actually back in the 1990s when they looked at technology and the role of technology. They said we need a completely different kind of person. We need a person that has depth as well as breadth. And because we are breaking down boundaries, silos everywhere, and to function across silos, you need a different kind of person. Now, there's one piece missing here, and I'll get to that because when I duplicated this slide, I didn't realize it wouldn't come across. So I'm going to talk about the T. I'm heavily invested in this, and I brought it to Michigan State. We are now a T-shaped organization, according to the president and the provost, and we're going to produce T-shaped students. And it is impacting how we're organizing slowly. So the T actually starts here. It starts with me. And I'm going to hold that to the end because I want to go through the rest of this, what this looks like, and then come back to the me because it's critically important. And it's the foundation piece. So the two parts that everybody in this room are familiar with, or should be, is the I part, the in-depth knowledge of a discipline and the mastery of a discipline. That does not go away. How much time we have to spend on teaching content may change. How we deliver it may change. And how we interact with it is going to change. But the major doesn't go away. What's new is deep in a system, and I wish that analytical thinking would go away. But a system, and I'll show you this in a minute, is what IBM put in. And they deal with 13 systems that all of us as humans deal with every day, and that's where they tackle their problems. And it was through this realizing that they were tackling problems that they went to the T, because they couldn't just send an engineer or a computer person out there to solve the problem. They found out they needed social scientists, humanitarians, communications people. So now almost 40% of IBM's workforce is humanitarians and social scientists, because they tackle things in systems. Engineers would solve a problem thinking that they had done it, and then the problem just moves to someplace else in the system. And they didn't unplug the system. And most of these companies like Verizon now is doing it. You've seen the new Verizon ads. Their phone, it's not a phone, it's now a dynamic, interactive tool to help farmers, medical people. They're all going with these devices. I'm not a phone company anymore. That's over there. What are young people going to say when Facebook and all this stuff isn't? You just don't move things around. This becomes a real device to do something with. And I'll see what they think about it. Okay, so, but here's what IBM calls systems. Now, there's flow systems, transportation, water, food, energy, and information IT. Clouds, they flow. There's people systems, building, retail, and hospitality entertainment, banking, healthcare, and education. And there's focus on governing. City, state, local. They've divided into state and local, federal. And then they throw in some higher ed on their own. But each one of these systems, the important point of putting this up here is it's really important that young people begin to learn a system. So if you have an interest, a passion, you can't define a major, put them in a situation where multiple faculty from multiple disciplines are working on that system. At Michigan State, we don't talk about systems. This is the hardest part to reconceptualize, though it's everywhere. And so we overlaid what we do, and we call it the grand challenges for the land-grant universities for the 21st century as our present, and they almost overlay here. And if you're not at Boise State, I say don't worry about having all 13. Look at what your comparative advantage is. Theirs is in supply chain. They got health, education, then focus on those. And find ways, but build the best understanding of how a system. So what we're going to move from right now is we teach an accounting student to teach them accounting, to find an accounting job. We don't worry about where it is. Now it becomes more important to what system are, how do you see the skills and competencies, how do you see different roles for accountant. Now you change them, and they go find their job where they want it. We don't just, it's going to change things big time. Okay, let's go back to here. We've got the bottom part. And then we're going to build the first part because this is still in the preview of the faculty. We're going to discount another system because young people, it just takes too long to learn. So that comes over your career, and that's later on. But the next one is interdisciplinary knowledge. If you're going to work in systems, you have to work with others from other disciplines. That means you have to be able to communicate with them. Most students waste electives. Some of it helpfully because they do them to explore and try things and figure out where they are. The saddest thing that's happening to higher education with the pressures coming upwards from parents to make decisions, from politicians and from employment is we're cutting out all the time for self-discovery in higher education, which was the really most important thing that we ever provided somebody. And we've now condensed it into the first 2 semesters, and now as we go to really helping students try to make the transition faster to more advanced students. So Michigan State, we've always had 56 credits and you had to declare a major when you applied for your 50, but we cheated. It's really when you finished your 56 credit. So that would have been at the end of your sophomore year if you were on taking normal load. We now want to go to 28 credits. That presents huge problems now, so they're going to phase it in. They're going to have a sliding 28 to 56. But some colleges are already adapting it, like College of Business. Now, I have a problem. I have 2,400 freshmen that want to be in the College of Business. But the College of Business only takes 1,100. I have 1,300 kids that are going to have to go somewhere, and usually they had 2 years to figure it out. Now they're going to have less than a semester to figure it out. And that's dumping a lot of students. And I do the same thing with engineering. Engineering starts with 1,400, and by the junior year, they have 750 when they enter the formal engineering program. And they're probably not going to back up very much. They'll still require 56 credit. They're just going to offer more introductory engineering courses. But I'm still going to have attrition. And that presents a problem because the students coming into the other colleges come in late. They then have to retake courses. They don't have the right mix of courses. They have lots of credit, but how to get them to graduate. But electives become really, really critically important because if you're a biologist and want to work in healthcare, but you find out I'm dealing with economists or political scientists or somebody, I need to be able to talk to them. So I need to be more intentional about those disciplinary courses. And I need to see faculty from those disciplines working alongside my faculty to see what it looks like and how we trade off knowledge on the same kind of issues. Okay. Then we got the top. The top part is the boundary spanning skills. These are the skills that allow one to cross functional areas, organizational areas, cultural boundaries, national boundaries. It's really critically important. You may be a process quality engineer at Blue Bunny Ice Cream in a little tiny town in Iowa. And this is a true story, by the way. So a young engineer went to an internship there, and his buddy went on a study abroad to England for 6 weeks and studied quality assurance in England and got to look at wines. He stayed in a little tiny town in Iowa, and he was signed 3 accounts on quality assurance in 3 different countries. They sell to 78 countries around the world. Those engineers have to know about dietary needs. They have to know about cultural needs. They have to know about proper way to market. And he's an engineer, and he has to talk to all these people. He knew more cultural awareness by staying in Iowa, but having to work on these accounts and dealing with those people every single day around the world than his buddy did that went to England, who didn't pick up the cross-cultural piece. He just saw, and he got to work on the wine, but he didn't get that experience. You got to be very careful here. But these are skills. These are teamwork, project management, cross-cultural, communication, critical thinking. These are boundaries. They have to take place in multiple contexts, which leaves me the me. The me is the thing that holds us together. I's, deep in knowledge, tend to get their expertise by deepening their knowledge, by knowing more of the external boundaries of their major discipline like faculty do, pushing research. They don't work introspectively as much. That's not everyone doesn't, they all do this. But a T has to know who they are, they have to be self-aware, they have to be highly confident, and they have to have clarity of purpose, and they have to have a set of values because they have to cross all these boundaries. And there's no guides. It's them. So this becomes a part, and what we're doing at Michigan State is taking the me and looking at confidence and awareness and purpose, so the message becomes purpose over career, clarity of purpose, and I have built out the model for the career professional side, and my close friend who is the chief academic officer for undergraduate, and we are using the exact same model for undergraduate education as a core. So from day one, starting in a week, when they come to campus for AOP, orientation, everybody on campus will have the same message, because now academics and professional development go hand in hand. They're so intertwined. So the messages have to be, now it's going to be really hard for us to do this because we got a big campus and we don't have everybody wants to play. Okay, how do we organize? This is something different. This is just one model, IBM. It's one I like it because I can separate, but you can do a million different models of this. So, but what you do is you line up your disciplines in a circle around it, and you put your interest areas or those research, those systems in the middle, and every discipline contributes at least one faculty to each one of those systems or research interests or however you define it. And the student comes in and picks the system in the middle first and begins to see how faculty interact. And then they pick their majors. But what happens here, has to happen here, is this, because they're systems, then the systems are all around the outside of the university. So what you have to have is this constant process of reaching out to the systems and bringing it back in, or sending the students through with the faculty out into the systems. So there's just a symbiotic relationship between the system, and so they're continually seeing not only the theory development and the content development, but the application at the same time. So we've gone through a big exercise at Michigan State last fall. Everything is around the T. The president believes in the T, and so the message is out. You start thinking about this. So we did learning, space, and technology around the T. So we're organizing space. So essentially rooms without walls. So walls have to become invisible in classrooms. We're looking at different ways to deliver courses where we have faculty from different disciplines in the room at the same time, where the students move between stations and they'll attack a biology problem from the perspective, and then they'll turn around and see that problem from an economic point of view. And and then they discuss the discrepancy in the knowledge base and the conflicts or the agreements, and how do you proceed from there? And this is trying out, and it's not universal, it's a hit or miss thing, and we've got some people really excited about this. You can organize this any way you feel comfortable, and makes the culture work, where you begin to do more interaction and integration. And there's a lot of this going on, all different kinds of stuff, and I bet you there's really exciting stuff right here in this room. Here's the 4 things that have to guide you. One, we have to be committed to promoting professional competencies, not vocational competencies, though there may be some of that certainly in this room, given the mix of institutions here. Okay, so you've got to make sure where you're at here on this. But even over those vocational skills, everybody has to have these professional skills. Two, we have to be really, really concerned about self-directed learning. It's in our jargon everywhere. But do we really know that this? I guarantee you we don't know very much about Michigan State students and whether they're really self-learners when they graduate. Most important is you have to be integrated. You have to integrate and help them across their liberal learning goals. That's our institutional, disciplinary, interdisciplinary, co-curricular activities. They have to be integrated, okay? And this is hard. We don't do this. Some of you may do this very, very well, depending on your programs and your students, but across the board, there's nothing. And capstone courses don't integrate across the discipline. They usually integrate across the discipline. So what you're asking for. And then the last thing is we have to break down our silos and be flexible, because as that very first picture showed, these students see the world very different, and they mix and match things that don't make sense to us but are very real to them. I have a student in animal science that wants to be in film studies because they're going to make the next great documentary on penguins. And I want you, and that's cute because I picked penguins because I can't never, it could be lemurs. They just did the lemur one, so it could be lemurs. But that's what they want to do. And what they want to do, and they go to find out how they can do that, and English says you can't be a film studies major unless you're an English major, and you go to animal science and they say, I don't even know if we have an English department on this campus. And we have barriers, but you have to be flexible. You want the chemical engineer that wants to be in turf grass management because he's going to do something, he's got this phenomenal idea to do something with, golf greens. He's into golf. And then what happens is we don't accommodate them. They leave and do it anyway. So we have to be much more flexible and down, because we get very rigid and you have to follow my rules and you can't go over there. Okay, so I'm going to tell you, this is my last thing. Am I running out of time? I am running out of time. But I promised Dan that I'd talk about this. Okay, what counts to employers? And this will be, I can get leave here and then I'll save my skin. Here's what employers look at and what's important. Now, this didn't translate when I put it on this slide from my normal slide, but the bigger the circle, the more important to employers. Now, this is death at my school, because the two most important things to faculty at my school are study abroad and civic engagement. Now, that does not mean that employers do not value study abroad and civic engagement. It doesn't mean that employers don't value faculty research, undergraduate research, scholarly research. But they have problems with it. The problem is, in the first two, in study abroad, it's a great experience because it does all the attitudes and behavioral things, which we dismiss now because everybody wants to be skills and competencies and employability. It does nothing for employability because students, it isn't designed for that in the first place. And the second place, there's no time taken with students to unpack that experience and repack it as an employer would look at it. So when they go talk to employers, to the employer it looks like an academic tour. It was a great pub crawl through Ireland. And because that's the best the students can talk about it. And we love pub crawls. What's wrong with that? I mean, I've led study abroad. Keeping them out of the pubs was my problem, but anyway, civic engagement usually are not, there's few students that spend their whole life like my daughter in civic engagement, and she built a career on it. But most students engage periodically in civic engagement as a part of their values clarification. They're not there long enough to develop the skills and competencies that we're looking at. They will contribute to them, but they don't feel, while companies are very engaged civically, and it's important to them, they do it for more wanted values. But students come and try to tell them they got skills. Talk about why it's important. It helped me clarify the values, that this is important to me. I want to be engaged in part of my life doing this, and I want to be with a company that is committed to helping. And so in my time away from work, I can do that. Scholarly research is limited because if a company doesn't directly know how that research applies and the student hasn't had any way to unpack that and look at the broader skills they got from that, then they have problems. But let's go to the top 3. One that employers really like, that really fits in here and is a counterweight to internships, is they like applied research in the field, with you taking students out there and working on a real world problem that they have to interact with the people out there. It's really important, because then now employer says, you know how to talk to us, you know how to define the problem our way, you begin to give results back that make sense to us. Now my faculty don't like to work it because they can't get A pubs out of that. But depending on what your promotion and tenure is like, Boise State can latch onto this big time, because you can get pubs out of that. You just get them in B journals, A- journals, not A+ journals. But students get a lot out of this. Faculty are enriched by this. Leadership in professional organizations. So if you have student professional organizations around themes, and you can build this in all your disciplines to have professional, or you can build young professional organizations so they interact professionally with employers much, much better. The big one is internships. The big elephant in the room is internships. Employers know that. They rely on that. It's something they know. So when students don't come very well prepared, and they're not going to in the interview, or they haven't unpacked all their other experiences and they can't pull them out, they're going to default to what they know. And they know internships, they know how to tweak and push the buttons on a student to get out of them what they think they want, and to figure out if they're a good fit for them. So politicians and everybody in the media has picked up that everybody has to have an internship. I want to caution against that. We've thrown everything in the kitchen sink in internships. There's no standards. You've really got to be careful here to know what you really want out of internships, and have some broad guidelines across institutions that these are what we expect, and the students, and educate the students, because half your students will never go through you to get their internships. They'll get it any way they want. And employers out there don't know what an internship is. They just say, everybody's telling us internship, we'll call it an internship. We'll make coffee. Okay? And so you gotta be careful. But there are other things like applied research. There's other things like team competitions across disciplinary teams that you can build into your programs and cooperate across faculty that are just as enriching and advance students as having them spend time in an internship that may be mediocre. But you need to set the standards. Okay, with that, I think I'm finished. Oh, my last thing. Those T back there, that faded thing, is what employers want. The best we can do. Now, this is me. My dad was a peach farmer. And we'd bring them out of the hothouses, and they'd be this high, and in 5 years they'd be as tall as I am, just starting to bear fruit. That's all college is. We have to cultivate them, we have to nurture them, and they're going to go out as many little different kind of shapes, and all different shapes and forms. But we have to give them the ground, because most of the work I've done at Boise shows that alumni, it's between the ages of 22 and 30 that most of the T is developed. So we have to let them know that they have the abilities to do that, even if the companies don't recognize that they're developing Ts and don't often allow them to platform. That's the best. So you're not going to build these great big Ts. And we shouldn't try to build those Ts. We need to build the little Ts and get them as far nurtured and developed as a T so they can stand on their own when they get out there, because they're going to have to, because the world around them is going to continually change every single day. And so if we shoot them for one job, I can't guarantee 5 years that job's going to be here. Okay? With that, I went way past